And what you're seeing here is right out of the playbook of the Mexican PRI, which I've been tweeting about, that's in business with the Democrat Party through my former colleagues in Arizona. It sounds like a crazy story, but when you start to connect all the dots, it really makes sense. And so Mexican PRI halts elections that they're not winning, and they backfill them with votes, and they burn ballots for the candidates that they don't want to win. These are classic PRI tactics that you're seeing being used here in an American election.
Hey friends, Sean from SGTReport.com and SGTReport.tv here, also the SGT Report BitChute channel, etc. Hey, just a real quick comment here. This was recorded earlier today before Fox News called Michigan for Biden while ignoring the 148,249 mystery ballots that showed up at 4 in the morning last night. All of which, 100% of which, went to Biden. It's absolute blatant criminality. You know it, I know it, we all know it, but the mainstream media is in bed with the Biden campaign, and we're quickly headed for a banana republic if this thing is not successfully challenged in the states in question. Before we begin, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. Guys, get the same VPN I use every day to browse anonymously. Get this, a new study found websites shared over 100 trillion pieces of personal data last year. That's data taken about users of various websites that are then used for advertising purposes. I don't like being spied on by advertisers or anybody else, which is why I use Virtual Shield. Virtual Shield is the VPN that was built with privacy in mind from the ground up. When you use Virtual Shield VPN service, your traffic is routed through their secure and encrypted servers, which means not only do you browse privately, it also means that any restrictions or censorship blocks on your internet are bypassed. And you can try Virtual Shield right now, completely free for 30 days. Virtual Shield continues to offer its loyal customers a whopping 50% off all plans for life. If you want to browse the internet anonymously and securely like I do, please visit virtualshield.com or click the link directly below this video. Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in on this, the day after the most contentious election or non-election in the history of our nation. I don't know how shook up you guys are, but boy, my blood's boiling, and it's because we're seeing absolute fraud in states like Michigan, Sharpies being used in Arizona, so ballots being tossed out. I've got on the line Jeffrey Peterson. He's the former CEO of one of the biggest social networks in U.S. history, which recently was acquired by eHarmony. So we're going to talk to Jeffrey because he once was a top donor to the DNC, a hardcore Democrat who has since become a Trump supporter. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
How are you?
Well, all things considered, I'm an optimist, so still doing my best to be optimistic despite everything.
Just tell people a little bit about your background, because you're sort of a heavy hitter.
I don't know how heavy I am. By accident, I ended up starting the first nationally branded Hispanic social network in the history of the United States called Que Pasa Corp. Traded on the NASDAQ stock market for many, many years with a peak market value of $500 million. Gloria Estefan, the singer from Miami, was my business partner on Que Pasa. That business was sold to Rick Scott, who's now a senator in Florida, about 12 years ago, and changed its name to Meet Group. So Meet Group continued trading on NASDAQ with the stock symbol MEET. And that company, which I started many, many years ago, was enough to get me into the technology circles. And in my former home state of Arizona, where I used to live, I don't live there anymore, I was very close with our state's governor, Janet Napolitano. I was a donor to the party. I helped her on her first election in 2003. And so I was in her inner circle for a long time. It's just been the past few years that I walked away from Democrats and was supporting conservatives, including Donald Trump.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention to what happened last night and what is happening today, the day after the election here, Wednesday, the 4th of November. Let me just do a screen share here. Rudy Giuliani is headed to Philadelphia with the legal team, massive cheating, stop the steal. John Cardillo, He writes, blue states were immediately called, red states were not. Yes, we saw that in live time last night. Counting was paused to find ballots. Well, what does that mean? Here's a great example. Jeffrey, did you see this? 148,249 new votes came in from Michigan at about 4 or 5 in the morning. And from what we're hearing, they all went to Biden.
Yep.
Your thoughts on what appears to be blatant election theft?
I know all about it. I used to hang out with these guys. I knew Tom Perez, who I'm a non-Hispanic and I speak Spanish because I used to run a big Spanish language social network. Tom Perez is a Hispanic and he doesn't hardly speak Spanish. I know him, and Howard Dean was my former business partner, so I'm very familiar with the DNC and the tactics that they're using. What you're seeing here is something I've been tweeting about for the past couple of years, which is the Democrats learned from their affiliation with the Mexican PRI political party, which a lot of Americans don't know about, but the PRI controls Mexico, and they have for more than 100 years, sometimes through other candidates. The Mexican PRI has shown the Democrats how to conduct election fraud. I've been tweeting about this for the past couple of years. My followers will be familiar with those very popular tweets I've sent out. And so unfortunately, that's what we're seeing again here.
In your view, given the rallies that we saw, we're just going to talk subjectives here, all right? There's quantifiables that we will talk about, but let's talk subjectively. In your view, given the rallies that we saw for President Trump and the very, very low turnouts we saw for Biden, how in the world could it be that 70,435,040 real people in this country voted for Joe Biden?
Yeah, the good news, I guess, if we can frame it that way, this year is that patriots are more prepared for this sort of thing, right?
Well, you'd think, except where is all the security? Where are the protocols for the ballot counting? Isn't it funny that there just seem to be none in these states? Even if they're Democrat-controlled states, where's the GOP? Where's the apparatus to have poll watchers to make sure that the integrity of the votes are counted, that the integrity of the election exists at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. And so we see the president's legal team gearing up today. I think they've made some good first steps to question what's happening, but it's going to take a lot more. And we've got a fighter in the White House, so that's what it's going to take. Unfortunately, they don't, they're not making anything easy. They never have. But we're going to get to the bottom of it.
All right, we'll do another screen share and report the news that CNN will not report. I bet you CNN has not shown this clip. Let's watch. Trump challengers being ejected from ballot canvassing in Detroit.
All the Republican challengers out of this room.
I want to show you something else. Steven Crowder had on somebody on his show here live today. It's still live, by the way, that shot video last night of coolers being brought in to that same room you just saw. Now, she didn't know what was in the coolers, but it's not too much of a stretch to believe that maybe they were ballots. Maybe they were ballot harvesting. How do we get to the bottom of this, Jeffrey?
Well, we've got to ask the difficult questions, and we can't be shy to call it what it is. The other side has certainly not been gracious in their attacks on conservatives, and this is our moment. If we let it go unquestioned right now, we've got the ramifications of what we're going to be dealing with a year or two from now are extraordinary, and so we cannot relent. We cannot let up for a moment in terms of questioning what really happened.
Let's go back to that Steven Crowder page. I want to show you something. Again, this is just subjective, but we can agree, I think, that one of the biggest conservative channels on YouTube that isn't one of the mainstream media networks is Steven Crowder's channel. He has 4.92 million subscribers. Now, on the lefty side, the Democrat side, we have the Young Turks with 5 million subscribers. I just wanted to point out, look at these view counts. 266,000 people, 208,000 people, 77,000 people at the Young Turks. Now over at Crowder, last night and today, 400,000 people watching live. It peaked last night at around 500,000 people. I just share that with people because I don't believe any of these numbers. I don't believe if we could do a real election, if we could redo the election on Friday, Jeffrey, and have it be honest, I'd be surprised if Biden could get 60 million actual votes.
Yep. Well, unfortunately, we're dealing with a party that lies. And they showed us that before the election. They've showed us that in prior elections. As a matter of fact, I wrote a whole thread about the Maricopa County recorder, the fellow who's in charge of the elections in Arizona's biggest county, Adrian Fontes, who is someone I know. A lot of us feel as though there was some funny business that went on with Senator Sinema's election in Arizona previously with the vote counts. And I can comment as to that too, because years ago I helped Kirsten Sinema start her career. She's a former very good friend of mine. But these people, unfortunately, they've headed down a very ugly path, and there's just no turning back from what they've got themselves involved with, these crooked Democrats.
Flush that out a little further for us about Maricopa County, will you?
Yeah, well, my former business partner of many years, and it sounds a little strange to say this as a grown adult, but I just say it anyways because it's true. My best friend, Marco Lopez, who he and I worked together for more than 10 years, is there in Arizona. He's a political operator who's going to be running for governor. And his childhood friend, Adrian Fontes, is the county recorder for Maricopa County, which is Phoenix, which is Arizona's most important county when it comes to deciding elections. And Fontes is someone who is not gracious in the way he addresses things. He is a brute force kind of guy. He famously was published in a newspaper article in the Arizona Republic by telling, and this is not an exaggeration, he told voters that tried to question voting results, quote unquote, to F themselves, as a public quote that he gave to the newspaper. I wrote a whole thread about it on Twitter. And so this is the gentleman, if we can call Mr. Fontes that. I refer to this group, which is former Arizona Governor Janet Napolitano's group of political operators. They've been called by the Arizona Capital Times the Arizona Mafia. This is a very, very heavy-handed group that is totally pro-Biden, right? Totally pro-Biden. They served on the Obama-Biden transition team themselves that are there counting the votes in Arizona right now.
We just see this in every election, Jeffrey. We saw it in 2016 in Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district down there, Broward County, Florida. Brenda Snipes, the election official, absolutely caught in blatant violations of election law. I don't think she ever did a minute's time in jail. And ultimately she admitted to destroying the ballots when Debbie Wasserman Schultz stole it from Tim Canova. And Tim Canova demanded a ballot recount. Snipes says, I destroyed all the ballots. And then Debbie Wasserman Schultz gets to go back to Washington, D.C. Have we had enough of this yet? And what in the hell are we supposed to do to stop it from happening in the future?
Yeah, well, we've got to keep up. We've got to keep up the fight, right? Step one is reelecting Donald Trump, because as we know, these career politicians, their priority number one is perpetuating their ability to enact a disingenuous agenda and act as frontmen for foreign powers and not in the American interest. So step one is making sure that Donald Trump is reelected to the White House. God forbid that doesn't happen. The stakes are so high here. And beyond that, I believe that another 4 years of Trump presidency would include the president continuing his investigations and his uncovering of all the corruption we've seen from the other side.
Right. I agree. We cannot give up this fight. We have to fight like our lives depend on it, because they actually do. My suggestion, yeah, I think so. And my suggestion was this: every single person found guilty of election fraud should be tried for treason, and they should pay the price for that treason. That is the only way to prevent this happening in every future election. People have to know what a serious crime this is, and that the penalties, if you're caught for election rigging or election fraud or vote rigging or ballot harvesting, is treason. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the penalties for treason is death.
Yeah, well, I am no expert on this topic, but they would certainly do it to us if they could, right? And so there's probably no more important issue on the minds of conservative voters, certainly, and I would go as far as to say all Americans, as finding the truth and undoing the corruption that's happening. And look, half of America is seeing a different version of the story than conservatives are. Another Trump term would mean a lot of awakening of other folks who have been lied to. And that is very, very important. I have to believe that the truth wins in the end. I have to remain an optimist. It's too easy to turn negative. And so, with everything that's happening right now, I'm doing my best to try to retain some of that optimism that the truth will surface here and that we'll be allowed to continue fighting corruption.
You were watching live last night, I imagine. How late
Yep.
did you stay up, and what network were you watching?
Yeah, 2 a.m. I was all over the place. Actually, I was watching my good friend. Quite frankly, I've been on the show many times. I was messaging with Frank on Skype while you guys were on there. But I was all over the networks. I was watching some of the mainstream media, and it's just unbelievable how fast they are to call the states for the Democrats and how reluctant they are to call the states for Trump. It's unbelievable bias. It is so obvious.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up next, because I primarily was on Fox News last night, and I wanted to reach through the screen and grab Brett Baer by the neck and shake him, because you know as well as I do that at 2, 3 in the morning, I stayed up till past 3. If Biden had been leading in Pennsylvania by those numbers, they would have called Pennsylvania for Biden. They would have
100%.
done the same thing in Michigan, but
Yep.
because Trump was winning in those states, they refused to call it. So the optics, when you wake up the next day, today, the optics are, oh, Biden's ahead. I mean, the optics to people that don't understand elections, it looks like Biden is way ahead for the electoral count because they won't call the states for Trump, that then stopped counting in the middle of the night and restarted counting today, miraculously finding new votes, new ballots. And Trump tweeted about it earlier today. He said, let me find it. Feel free to comment while I find it.
Yeah, no, not to be too repetitive, but this is something I've been tweeting about because I want to educate American voters, right? I believe I'm one of the only American born and raised English language dominant technology CEOs that ever worked in Latin America for a significant period of time. And I got to know how Mexican elections work. And what you're seeing here is right out of the playbook of the Mexican PRI, which I've been tweeting about, that's in business with the Democrat Party through my former colleagues in Arizona. It sounds like a crazy story, but when you start to connect all the dots, it really makes sense. And so Mexican PRI halts elections that they're not winning, and they backfill them with votes, and they burn ballots for the candidates that they don't want to win. These are classic PRI tactics that you're seeing being used here in an American election.
When we think of Mexico, I don't think of, the most straight and narrow governance, right? I don't think about a democratic republic like the one we're supposed to have here. We're not supposed to be enduring this kind of fraud. This is banana republic level stuff that's going on. So what is your view on the forensic analysis of these elections? Isn't there a way to go in and absolutely prove the fraud going on in Michigan, possibly Wisconsin, most definitely down in Pennsylvania?
We've got, this is, I also talk about this a lot because I like to educate conservatives on technology, and unfortunately conservatives haven't had the same access to the types of tools that the left has had. We all know that the left dominates big tech. They've been censoring all of us on the social media platforms, which is very close to home for me as a former social media CEO. But answering your question, we've got to get a hold of the data. And we've got some great data scientists around now. It's a more common profession than it was 10 years ago, for example. We ought to be able to conduct all types of analysis, statistical analysis, regression analysis about the times and the events and where the changes and the trends have been seen to point out why we believe there's been fraud and then build on that case to prove it.
How about something as simple as looking nationwide in every single county, registered voters versus total votes cast for each
Absolutely.
candidate? Can we start
Absolutely.
there?
Absolutely. And you know, the numbers, it's all relative. From a data mining perspective, they're not that big. When you think about all the voters, potential voters in the United States, or how many people voted in this election, 100 million sounds like a lot, but when you start using data analysis tools, it's really not. And some of these trends, I believe, will stand out like a sore thumb, particularly the ones you just mentioned, where you've got more votes cast than actual eligible voters. What in the world is that?
Right. All right. One more screen share here. I found it. Donald Trump, how come every time they count mail-in ballot dumps, they are so devastating in their percentage and power of destruction? He's probably talking about the 138,000 or whatever it was, 148,249 new votes that showed up in the middle of the night in Michigan, thereby basically handing Michigan to Biden if that's allowed to stand. It's a good question the president has. I think you know the answer.
Yeah, it certainly is a good question. In the worst case scenario in this analytical numbers race is where you just have to believe what the other side says, particularly when the other side has proved themselves to be liars. I mean, let's face it, they lied about the polls, right? So that they've already proven that they've lied. We're supposed to believe them about this, where they're just throwing a bunch of quote unquote votes over a wall, right? And we're supposed to just take it at face value. I don't understand how that makes logical sense. I mean, again, many of these states were supposed to go +7, +10, +12 points to Biden. That was clearly a orchestrated group effort to mislead voters, right? So they've already proven that they're lying there. Now we're supposed to take them at their word on the votes? I don't think so.
I was just going to try to find another tweet, and Jack over at Twitter banned it. So I think it was from Greg Rubini, and I'm going off memory here. He basically tweeted something out saying, D, Democrat plus CIA coup, to which I think I added, well, it's actually a mainstream media and a Democrat, perhaps CIA coup. But this is a coup. Can we agree?
Absolutely. If that's, if that's what they're going to call, I think there's other things you can call it as well. But you're certainly not the first person I hear use that term, and I've been reading it all day on social media. And it's going to come out in the end because we've got a voice now, right? There's enough patriots that are familiar with these tricks we've been misled through how many different events now? It's just been one after another after another. And this is the latest disingenuous campaign.
Well, what really gets us too, Jeffrey, is we knew we'd be here today. I mean, it should have been a red wave for Trump just based on fairly subjective data like the sizes of the rallies. I mean, tens of thousands of people showing up, people all over the world, frankly, having parades on behalf of President Trump, Donald Trump, nobody showing up for Sleepy Joe. And today we're told 70,435,000 people in this country voted for Joe Biden. This was their plan. We heard it yesterday. Their plan was under no circumstances would Joe Biden concede. And the mainstream media, last night I was hearing, or yesterday I was hearing, they would not air a Trump victory speech if he claimed victory, but they would broadcast a Joe Biden victory speech if he claimed victory. But anyway, here we are today. We find ourselves in a situation where the mainstream media is completely in the pocket of the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And the most important election of my lifetime is on the line.
Yep, for all of us. And there's many of us that have been targeted and damaged and harassed by the Democrats already. One can only imagine what they'll do next. God forbid these people get back in office.
Yeah, I mean, I just shudder to think where we're headed if somehow this is allowed to stand, but I don't think it can stand. It definitely will not stand up to scrutiny, the forensic scrutiny of the vote counts, of the votes across the country. I mean, if they have to go in and dig in deep over in Michigan, if they have to do it in Pennsylvania, if they have to do it in Arizona, I do not think these vote counts for Biden will stand up to scrutiny. But you mentioned how so many of us have been damaged, and I couldn't agree more. Me personally, I've been financially damaged, in fact gutted, a victim of David Brock's Media Matters that wrote a hit piece that led to the purging of multiple YouTube channels on October 15th, and then another Media Matters hit piece on the 22nd of October, which led to Patreon purging 14 creators' accounts, including me, all of whom were named in the Media Matters piece. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the power of these people and how nefarious they are?
Yeah, well, I mean, how many of us have dealt with it? The president himself has dealt with a disingenuous $40 million investigation that didn't prove much of anything useful for anyone. You were targeted by a hit piece. I was targeted by a hit piece. I've been litigating with my former Democrat colleagues from Arizona for a couple of years now. So look, these are vicious people. I don't I don't know what to say. It's a trend that's proven itself again and again. I am not like that. You and I have some of the same friends. I find conservatives to be very level-headed, reasonable people. I don't wake up in the morning and think about who I can attack, who I can try to frame for things they didn't do, or who I can demonetize. But I actually like to hear everyone's point of view. I don't want my point of view to be the only one, but this is something we see again and again from the new left. Look, I even know former Democrat donors like myself, and I think there's more of them that are showing up in the media that are questioning. I'm no longer with the Democrats, but there are some who are still with the Democrats that are questioning, when did the Democrat Party go so far left that they've just turned into extremists?
Yeah, absolutely. Just absolute extremists. You're right. All right, two more questions. Let's talk just a little bit about Twitter and Jack Dorsey. You knew him personally, or maybe you know him personally, correct?
Yeah, not my best friend or anything, but I've been to headquarters. I've worked on their high performance databases. I've worked on some business transactions with him. Yeah, so yeah, I'm generally familiar.
Well, when he was grilled the other day by senators, he was asked, does he think Twitter has the power to sway an election? And he said no. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, we all know that social media is the new mass media, right? They certainly have the power to sway an election where they're engaging in promotion of candidates. It costs money to run ads for most people on the social networks. We spend, to make any kind of meaningful impact, you're spending, I don't know, $20, $50, $60,000 a month as a professional technology company out on social media. But the social media promotes the political candidates for the left for free, which many of us feels as though represents a sort of in-kind contribution to the political party. I think it's a very, very good argument that conservatives have raised in that regard. And so my answer to your question is, I believe social media absolutely has the ability to influence, not just Twitter, Facebook too. And there's another 40 social media platforms out there. When you aggregate them all together, but the influence shows up in the statistics. It's all a numbers game.
All right. Final question for you, and it's sort of a big picture view, just a little background. I was a big Ron Paul supporter back in, when he was running, and completely maligned by the mainstream media, or worse, ignored entirely despite all his grassroots support.
Yeah.
Given that Howard Dean was a business partner of yours, you'll recall how the mainstream media roasted him because of his war cry and destroyed him overnight in a colluded effort to do so. And I just wanted to get your view on the DNC and the Democratic Party and how corrupt they are, corrupt to the core, because I would make the argument that if I was a Democrat, I would have been a huge Tulsi Gabbard supporter, and she would have been great for the ticket. Young, patriotic, military background, but they give us Biden. But just talk to the criminality of the DNC.
Take it from someone who knows firsthand, because my former best friend, Marco Lopez, is now the front man for the Mexican PRI political party and their interests with the United States Democrat Party, right? This is something I've been tweeting about a lot. I'll do the shameless self-plug for my Twitter handle is Real Jeffrey P, if you want to read my coverage of this. But answering your question, Howard Dean, and I'm not here to talk good about him, but he was a different kind of DNC chairman than what you've got now. Tom Perez is an extremist, right? And what the DNC wanted was a front man, right? And again, I'm sorry to keep going back to this. It's the style of the PRI political party from Mexico. It's been well established. They use front men to enact an extreme agenda, right? This is what the neoliberals have been doing in Mexico for a long time. They didn't want a legitimate candidate on the Democrat side. They wanted a front man. And what is Joe Biden if not the ultimate front man who has a difficult time thinking for himself? I don't say that to be cruel or mean in any way. It's just the reality of the situation. He doesn't even know what day of the week it is a lot of the time. He's being used by the Tom Perez's DNC as their front man candidate for the extreme interests that come behind him. And many of them, unfortunately, are international interests.
You're a very measured guy, so people know my opinion about this. I'm just curious to hear what you would say, being a measured, intelligent guy. What is the extremist agenda of the Democrat Party? What are we going to get if Joe Biden, God forbid, enters that White House as president?
Yeah, well, the problem with the Democrats, I saw this happen to a bunch of my friends. Like, you can go on my Twitter and see my pictures with Nancy Pelosi. You can see my pictures with Howard Dean. You can see my pictures with, and I spent years around these people, and I saw it while it was happening to them. They started to like the easy money that was flowing to them. They all did, and they've all enriched themselves. You know, this is the great thing about having a president who was already successful financially before he became president, because Trump can't be bought. He doesn't need anybody's money. But these Democrats, they never had money, right? I wasn't super rich. I wasn't Jack Dorsey, but you know, I'd made millions of dollars on my social media company. My former friend, Marco Lopez, he had never made millions of dollars, but he was very curious about it. So when the easy money started flowing to him from Mexico, he just started doing whatever they asked him to, period. So you see the same thing across the board. All of these people at the top ranks of the Democrat Party are enriching themselves with foreign money because it flows to them easily. And then they just apparently do whatever the foreign interests ask them to. And it terrifies me to think, if you have a president of the United States who's been installed by foreign money, which is what you're looking at presently, unfortunately, what is going to be the agenda of that foreign money for America? I can't answer that question. I would be speculating, but it certainly seems that we've got a lot of evidence to suggest that the Communist Party of China has been backing the Bidens. And I don't say that to sound like an extremist. It's just reality. There's plenty of evidence. What does the CCP want for the future of America? I just don't know.
But it's not good. We know that.
And it's not good. You know, I noticed that this made me sick to my stomach. I noticed just the other day that Biden was talking about how he wanted to enact a social credit score. And it sounds exactly like what they're doing in China with China's social credit score. Can you imagine?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can imagine. All right, we'll round it out with a couple of tweets here, and feel free to jump in and comment on any of this, Jeffrey. President Trump 2 hours ago, we're winning Pennsylvania big, but the Pennsylvania Secretary of State just announced that there are millions of ballots left to be counted.
Yeah, well, why not? If they already pulled out as many as they did, why not pull out some more, huh, while you're at it?
If you were on the Trump team at this point, what would your advice be?
Well, I believe they've already initiated litigation. It's a very powerful tool we have at our disposal as Americans. I would immediately be seeking injunctions wherever possible. And look, they've got to go back, and you used the correct term. The correct term is forensics. We've got to conduct forensic audit. Unfortunately, this is not good for America. I agree with the president when he says it's not good for America, but these people give us no choice. And we've got to be strong enough and tenacious and diligent enough to beat these people at their own game. If they're going to be tenacious with us, we've got to be tenacious with them. Look, this is a fight for freedom, for the future of America. We've got to conduct a forensic audit. And when the results are uncovered, we'll have the truth for everybody to see. And then those who have done whatever they've done need to respond to that particular set of facts, whatever they may be.
All right, final screen share here, and it's your Twitter page. That's @RealJeffreyP. If you guys want to follow him over on Twitter, you can read about all of the things he was mentioning and the things he's been tweeting about. Where else can we find you, Jeffrey?
Well, my very not interesting webpage is jeffreypeterson.com. look, I don't, I'm a casual participant in politics these days, but, I love my country. I always will. I left the Democrat Party because I saw how corrupt they were becoming, and I can't stand to watch what's happening now. So if you do follow my Twitter feed, I do my best to try and educate conservatives about a few things in the areas where I do have some knowledge. It's a privilege to have shared this experience with other patriots such as yourself, and I was listening to your comments with Dilly and Frank last night. I think you guys are spot on with your analysis of the importance of this election for the United States.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your voice too. I mean, we're all in this mess together. That's what I've been saying for more than a decade now. But boy, we find ourselves deep in the muck now. You also contribute, don't you, over at Corey's Digs? I know you're friends with Corey.
Yeah, she and I have collaborated on a number of threads. She does great work. My gosh, she's one of the hardest working researchers I know. I've had the privilege to collaborate on some threads with Corey over the past couple years, and so please send her my regards next time you talk. I haven't been as active on Twitter in recent months. I've been doing a little bit I've been working on my technology business a little bit, but I look forward to getting more involved going forward. It's very hard to stand by and watch what's happening right now without adding anything to the conversation.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do appreciate your time and your voice today, so thank you very, very much. And keep in touch, will you? I mean, if anything pops up on your radar, we'll get you back on, and we can, let's expose some criminals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the eternal optimist. I'm hoping all of this somehow works out for the best. Thanks again for all the work you're doing. We'll be in touch.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Guys, our guest has been Jeffrey Peterson. Thank you, Jeff.
Take care.
All right. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Check us out at sgtreport.tv to support us and get all of the exclusive content. And please, for real news 24/7, visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless, guys. Bye-bye.